are you indicating that's my responsibility? I would accept no responsibility whatsoever.
Then, now, forever, together.
Damn.
I just love that intro.
Hey, when Brother Fam said, "Hey, can you get online real quick?" I said, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Oh, that was the missing piece." Shouts out to Brother Fam. We're back for another no cap recap of Mr. McMahon. This is episode 2, Heat, aka when the shit really hits the fan. I think. Sorry, YouTube. I like the one thing I remember most about this episode, like, cause they showed a lot of, like, they ended episode 1 with like a lot of highs, like, you know, WrestleMania 1, and, you know, we Hulkamania is running wild. Like, they teased that, you know, shit was gonna go downhill, but like they was up, you know, it was up, and they was still up. They kind of faltered a little bit because I mostly just remember them talking about how the signals was all messed up for WrestleMania 2 again. Doing the most. You don't need 3. Imagine Ashe trying to do 3 different venues in North Carolina to do for their second show. Like, you can't. You stick to what you know, and they ain't never do that shit ever again.
In 2024, you probably have an easier time pulling that off. I think I can pull that off in 2024.
I would hope so. Your Wi-Fi would need to be on point at a certain point. That's all. That would be your biggest worry. Nah, but then they then. This is when you get to the point where it's like, niggas be lying, like niggas be big lying, because like because there's always a conversation around WrestleMania 3, and there's like he said it out his own mouth. It's still the largest 93,000 in that stadium. They always quoting that number, and then here come Dave Meltzer. It was actually like 78,000. You know, it was like he said that Andre had never gotten slammed. Andre got slammed like 20 times. He never lost. He lost all these times. Like, you know, it was all this stuff, but it was again, speaking like the inverse of what Fan was just saying, though, it was like, because there was no internet, because it was a lot of you wouldn't, there was some, you could get away with Andre the Giant being a certain type of attraction because there was no word talking about what this man was doing from like state to state. So it was the first time you saw that motherfucker, it was like that person just appeared out of thin air. You could try and get that off, but this was also the point where because wrestling was they had Aretha Franklin at the damn WrestleMania 3. Like it was at such a height, you can't find people not, like, someone has to talk about it. And I think that was the flip side of this episode that I like. We were right before we started recording, we were talking about some of the violence that got imparted on those who were trying to report. What's my man's name?
Stossel.
Slapped the shit. And the other one got choked out.
Rest in peace, Richard Belzer. Richard. If most people may have seen him on like Law and Order, but he was like a comedian for a minute, and he had a late night show. And I guess this was during the WrestleMania 1 build. I don't remember if there was like beef or like, I think Belzer wasn't like a big wrestling fan, he didn't get it or whatever, but like it turned into this bit on the show. But like Hogan legit put him in like a front face lock and had the man passed out, but then he dropped him like that.
Dropped him like a bad habit.
What Mr. T said? Oh, he'd be all right. Just let him lay there for a little bit.
You hit him with the little smack to the
face.
And got you good. Blood on the back of his. I was like, oh my god.
Fucked up. Yeah, no, he was fucked. But that was the thought was just like the Stossel stuff. You're going to ask about the business. We're going to try and protect the business. You think it's not real? You see how big? You know, like at a certain point, I could show you was real. That's why Stossel got. Matter of fact, wait, hold on. I got to do that. I'm sorry, I got to do it justice. He hit it with that. Slap the shit out that man.
That settlement was payal too.
Yeah, that settlement in the bank account. But right. That's the cost of doing business, right? That's the cost of doing business.
I think there was a us versus them mentality that all great leaders use, right? We saw Heyman do it in Beyond the Mat, talking about WWE, and I think that was a point where Vince brought them into the room and was like, he's getting on my nerves.
Right.
And niggas like, what you need me to do, boss?
I'll take care of it. Don't worry, because they probably thought they was gonna get a little, you know, I mean, and a little bonus or whatever, you know.
I think that also speaks to the atmosphere of that era. I think that those guys too. I'm not going to say they were Vince's equals, but in the scope of his career, they're the closest to being able to G-check Vince or really speak to him. Like, they're not looking at him like how a Trish Stratus or Matt Hardy or someone like that would look at him. You know, they're like, girl, I used to know your father. Girl, you was a terrible ass announcer. Like, what is this?
He wasn't. We didn't talk about that in episode 1. He was he was a fairly bad announcer.
That was funny.
Again, that was good to see too. That was good to see.
I guess his tone, though. I liked his vocal.
Yeah.
But I didn't like the of course the play-by-play
commentary. Yeah.
I think.
I mean, they showed his first date too. You know what I mean? Like, it
was his first day, and like I didn't like Michael Cole in his first run. It wasn't until after a while where and I think that's kind of I don't know if that's why he wants people like a Michael Cole. Like he clearly knew something. You know what I mean? Like the idea of what he say? I'm the conduit. I'm the one that has to explain what's going on in here. Like that is. It shouts out Chris Lee, shouts out Joey Styles. Like there's some people who made Jim Ross. Like there's some people that made an art form out of explaining what's going on in the squared circles. And who was doing that before Vince like that?
Shout out to them for not cutting out Jim Ross too.
Facts. Again, there's some important people that are like fairly important to some parts of these stories, but So obviously. It's almost like black wrestling tradition at some point. I didn't realize they were going to get into no holds barred like they did in this episode. And I did not know that the lore was that, Vince McMahon, who was, I think he was afraid to lose Hulk Hogan to Hollywood. And he said, well, hey, you want to make a movie? Make one together. So they locked themselves in a hotel room and wrote the script for this 35-year-old piece of trash. That's where the Dookie line. That Vince McMahon wrote that Dookie line, right? It had to have been.
Oh my God.
It's terrible. Have you seen that? You saw that movie, Mimi?
Yes, I went to see it in the movies because I was excited.
I loved it as a kid.
Of course you love it as a kid, but now you look at it and you're like, what in the fuck knuckles? Like, what?
Who's main man name? Prel? What is his real name? He's one of those guys who always popped up in movies.
Yeah, I like that. I was looking at some stuff on No Holds Barred, and it was funny. Like, Kurt Fuller is his name, and there were a number of movies. Actually, let me pull up his IMDb because I think like for that era, like specifically that 87 to 92, he was the main bad guy in Ghostbusters 2. He was the bad guy. He was the evil guy in Wayne's World. Scary Movie. What else was he in? There was something else.
But he was always that guy.
He was in a lot. He was in a lot of stuff, and he was always that. It's his face. There's something about his face.
Wayne's World party time.
But what a. I think the big part, Vince probably wanted to hit one of them doodles when a lot of this was going on, because the bulk of this, they introduced Phil Mushnick, who's probably he was probably the most hated person in all the WWE back in that era. But with Phil Mushnick comes all of the drama. I mean, you get the steroid trial. Do I have the image? We were talking about Vince. He got neck surgery like right before the trial, and just started rocking a neck brace. Shout out to
because that nigga was trying to kayfabe real life.
I don't even think did he really have that surgery, because the way that man was moving his neck in that brace.
He probably didn't have surgery for real.
Back in the Huxtable house.
Yo,
this man sitting up in this.
It said
he had that shit on.
Yeah.
To the left, to the right, to the left, to the right. Like,
he
what?
It was again. I mean, his back was against the wall. He was. They said he was facing 11 years or something on each count, plus whatever the fine was per each count. He was going to be gone. If we wouldn't have got Attitude Era or Ruthless, we wouldn't have got none of this. We wouldn't have got TKO Group.
No.
I was actually thinking about that too. What would have happened if Gorilla Monsoon had bought the
damn ground?
Right.
That's what would have happened.
It would have been another UWF.
This show wouldn't be this, that's for sure.
We would not be here.
No shade to Big Willa.
Right.
They would not have been calling it the Vince position.
No.
At all. At all. It'd have been called
This position is crazy.
Vince actually, yeah.
Bankruptcy.
Vince position is not the name of the episode. Because
don't do Vincent K.
That's nasty.
Why not?
I don't want to. I do not want to do.
You know, Vincent K got his challenges.
Well, I will say too. Also too. If you want to get any type of background on how Vince McMahon operates when the law is involved, I'm glad that they mentioned the Jimmy Snuka Nancy situation. The 83.
Piece of that young lady.
He beat up that woman and she ended up passing away. And
that's terrible. And that's why Tamina never got that belt. Not because Tamina didn't do nothing that Tamina did anything, but sometimes your past, your lineage has to pay for the sins of its ancestors.
That's crazy.
And I feel like Tamina never getting that belt, because there's no reason when we look at some of the women who have been women's champions, it's like, girl, you had the belt, but
Tamina's brown, brother. Tamina is brown.
I mean, yeah, but Jackie had the belt. You know,
right.
you know,
yeah.
Like Tamina, she is a Samoan.
She should have been a champion. Yeah.
The fact that she never had that belt, I don't think. I'm not going to say it was this grand plan, but I think sometimes fate, karma, has a way of
that's correct.
And sometimes you are a direct beneficiary of that karma, even if you didn't have anything to do with it.
And they touch on that in later episodes, I think. And then, he kind of like, downplays that and says it's something else. But I think maybe some outcomes aren't what the outcome is supposed to be. But I think he goes down that path. Like, he intentionally does certain things to, going back to, what was the comment in the first episode with him going through stuff, like you have to go get through it until you get out of it type thing. Like you just have to bite the bullet. I think that shows that is his mentality up until a certain point.
Also, up until a few years ago, Samoans and Pacific Islanders were known as great hands, not really championship material, but they all good hands.
True thing. But it's still no reason why Tamina never got that belt.
Right.
I mean,
there's several reasons, but I ain't gonna slander the young lady.
I mean, yeah, but you put the belt on absolute garbage.
But you think that's the universe?
You know what I'm saying?
Paying it back.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Because I was looking at Tamina when she first came to the company and like in her early runs. Tamina is still very much a beautiful woman to me. And when she was younger, she was stunning when she came in the company. So I'm just trying to figure out. Like, why? You said what? You said Tamina on my list.
So,
Big Mina, young Mina, they get it. Older Mina is giving my good girlfriend that I crack up with at work, who we go out for drinks every now and then, and I call her for real shit. I tell her real shit at work. I like Tamina. I just think it just never came together for her in the way that I think it could. But I really do enjoy and like Tamina. I remember her WrestleMania moment where they started rooting for her. She didn't win the belts at WrestleMania the tag. But I like that people said, you know what? This lady has been around for a while. She has given to the business.
Give her props.
She deserves something. Well,
that speaks to how he felt about women too. right? I think it doesn't completely touch here, but in this episode he says, the women in professional wrestling at that time was D class A and a D class A business. You know what I mean? He didn't have much respect for. He came into not really respecting. Look what he did to Wendy Richter. There was no respect, and it goes back to how he
kind of think Wendy Richter earned that.
Right?
She didn't want. She didn't want to get that thing up.
She didn't. Well, she didn't want to do that with Moolah, and
she shouldn't. And you know what? The thing is, I get Vince's mind state with that, but also too, I understand where Wendy is going. I think that also, to me, is one of the first signs of Vince being a renegade, but also not being a trendsetter. Like, you're a trendsetter to a certain point, and it's no reason why that belt should have went on Moolah's out of shape, prostitute playing, abusive ass.
Right.
But the thing is, and this is one of the things that I heard Vince loud and clear on, and he told you who he was for a second. He said, end of the day, baby, that's my belt. I put it on you, but that's my belt. You know what I'm saying? And I think that really is the mindset of, like, Vince knows he's Vince.
Yes.
Right? For the good and the bad, he knows he's Vince. And that was a point in time where homegirl was like, but I don't want to not be champion. And he said, I don't care.
Well, here's what's interesting. The last 3 stories were consistent. Him telling this story isn't consistent.
Well, I think you get a lot of that too.
What actually happened?
Because
I don't even know if that's what she did.
At a certain point, though, I think because there's so much because they start talking about the Ring Boy scandal. Vince don't really got much to say about here. There's other people talking about Terry Garvin and Pat Patterson, this, that, and the third. Like
they didn't even bring up Pat. They didn't even bring that stuff up. They didn't bring that stuff up.
They didn't talk about what is the Ring Boy scandal. Hold on, what is that?
You don't know about the
Ring Boy scandal.
So
is this talking about,
I mean, back in the day.
All right, yo.
In the 90s, there was an executive.
Yes, back in the days, there were some things.
There was an executive working at WWE named Terry Garvin. If I'm not mistaken, he was the kayfabe brother of Ron Garvin. He was a former wrestler and whatnot. He was accused.
That was Terry Garvin from.
Yes.
Really?
So what happened? What happened?
He got accused of harassing an underage ring boy, who then got fired because they said he got fired because he refused those advances. He reached I think the kid reached a settlement with WWF. Garvin, Pat Patterson, and a ring announcer, Mel Phillips, they all resigned after that incident.
Was Mel a Negro?
And then he got rehired.
Sure. Yeah, Pat Patterson ended up. Well, and that's what they were talking about in episode 2. It's like at a certain point. Yeah, Mel Phillips was a football player. Yeah, it looks like that was a black man. Is a black man. That looks like that man is still alive on Twitter and everything. Pat Patterson. That's what we were talking about in the last episode. That thought about who probably knows Vince the most. I think at that point you saw that Pat Patterson was one of those people in that inner circle. But I think a lot of that first Intercontinental Champion. He looked again for everybody who probably thought, oh, Vince Jr. don't really know the business. He's not in it like everybody. All these other good old boys. Pat Patterson was the guy. Did he come up with the Royal Rumble?
He invented the Royal Rumble.
He was doing a lot of the big the finishes for a lot of the big matches. If you watch Wrestle with Shadows, Pat Patterson's the one is basically there like, all right, this how the Montreal Screwjob going to go down. Like he was trying to tell Brett what was going on before everything went awry. Like it
was interesting though how when they talked about that whole scandal, everybody was like, well, the other two, Mel did it, and Terry did it, but I'm gonna be honest. I ain't think Pat Patterson did nothing. No way. And it was a lot of
Pritchard was immediate with that.
Going on.
Yeah.
A lot of people protecting Pat in this episode.
Yes,
they fuck with Pat, but that's the thing. It's like that's when you hear Vince say, "Hey, you're gonna get the story that I want to tell you." That's part of it. A lot of this is part of the overarching narrative. Pat Patterson is one of those guys. When he passed, they had a whole gauntlet match on SmackDown, talking about his legacy for all these old Intercontinental champions. Like, that man is revered over there. So unless there's something on a tape, some like specific evidence that said there's some stink on his man name, Pat Patterson goaded to them.
They're gonna protect Pat to the end.
Yep.
To the end.
The thing that's interesting is that I think for the older guard, and when I say older guard, meaning the golden era and like that whole realm, there's a certain amount of mental conditioning that I think Vince has done to them. No matter what,
blind loyalty.
They will never talk bad about Vince. Now,
never.
Younger people, once you start getting into Attitude Era and on, you'll find some people to be like, now wait a minute. Them Golden Era guys, you just never going to you're never going to get them to flip on Vince.
You saw it on Undertaker's face. Undertaker he wasn't budging.
Yeah. They're never.
I know.
Part of it, once again, I don't want to sound problematic, but in a world where people are so disloyal and so wishy-washy and so my word is not my bond, not saying you should condone wrong things, but it's something impressive about having people go to the grave. You have conditioned them. This man is powerful. He has conditioned a whole group of men to no matter what.
Don't say shit.
Shut up.
Like, that's some mafia type shit.
Yeah. Listen, it speaks to how Tony Atlas was talking.
Well, I'm glad that was where because that was kind of the conversation that came out of that Ring Boy scandal, and the talk about, well, what do you do if you know that Vince McMahon's right-hand man may be one of the people that's out here, sexually harassing these ring boys or whatever? And Tony Atlas straight up, he said, who you going to tell? There's not much you can do. What was I wrote it down. He said, you either take it or go home is what he said. And when because the interviewer kept insisting, he was like, well, wouldn't you tell somebody? And he's like, who? And the interviewer was like, Vince. And he started laughing. He's like, to do what? Get fired? Like, and that was like, when he,
bro.
But when he said that, I mean, it's one of the things that I think the people, I'm not saying they don't have to deal with it today, but I think they probably dealt with it more then, because the way that the industry was at that time. It was, especially if you're a black person, especially if like whatever the case may be, if you're not Hulk Hogan or one of them guys on top, it would be very easy for you to get bounced out of there. So I think there's some people where they like. Roddy Piper will always talk about being like, the guy who would stick out like a sore thumb and say what he needs to say. A lot of those wrestlers weren't like that. Again, didn't they bring up, if I'm not mistaken, in one of the first two episodes, they brought up Jesse Ventura and the idea of the wrestling union. And then he was the only guy.
That's right. And Hogan went telling.
When they realize, hey, at a certain point, if Hogan's not going to be on our side, it's not going to make a difference. They all shut the fuck up. I think that's that mentality. A lot of that. That's where that Tony Atlas comment came from.
Vince said, if you go to that meeting, y'all all fired.
Yeah.
And what you gonna do? Go
right.
Exactly. What you gonna do? Tell?
There, it would have been Vince.
Right.
It would have been Vince.
All right. Pack your shit, you get out of here. Right? Is anybody with you? Tell them to get their shit too. Yeah.
That's exactly what it's given. But I think it's impressive. I think we have to kind of view this under a lens of there was a world that existed where certain things were just done in ways that were unethical.
But acceptable.
It's the American way.
Mentally abusive, and racist, and womanizing. Does it make it right in today's society? No. But the only thing that we can do now is make sure that we craft the world that is equitable, that we want to live in.
Word.
It's good to, I think, re-examining history is good for learning how to not repeat it.
Yeah.
Re-examining history, unless there's some DNA evidence or something like that where you can bring people to justice for real. Re-examining history to change past history is kind of like a lame duck to me.
Just gotta learn from
You
it.
know what's interesting? What's interesting is when we go back to the whole Wendy Richter thing and we talk about the women's revolution, it feels like she was doing that. And
She's
nobody was listening. Yeah, and nobody was listening. Even bringing in Cyndi Lauper was a thing, and still they did not want to hear it. And it took years, like almost 20 years, for them to say, okay.
Well, it's the one thing that I said last episode is that the thing that for me, the overarching story of this is that pro wrestling is a societal mirror, and it's holding up what was outside, right? It's the reason why, and I think this era, even in real life, is the era of going back, and DDM was talking about what happened back then. I think it's identifying spades. Like that spade was a spade. Yo was tripping. If he did it now, he would be tripping, and he got away with it back then. But at the same time, because he got away with it doesn't mean we are going to validate his actions over time.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
Which is the key. This episode also dealt with I totally forgot that Rita Marie, the first woman referee in pro wrestling, also
lady
had lady referee is how they refer to her. She
and
also
they did say lady wrestling too.
Lady wrestling, yeah. That's what they were saying. I forgot she had allegations, and she was kind of it was ill to remember that there was a time where Vince McMahon and Dave Meltzer were sitting next to each other on like Donahue, and McMahon's just getting yelled at, and everybody's got all these questions. They call him, a piece of trash and all this stuff. And but then there's one guy, I don't remember what show Rita Marie was on, but the guy's like, so what were you trying to do? Just being cool with the rest? Like it would the way, like speaking to the way that they would speak to the women in these situations, it didn't feel like it was very much a mirror to society, good, bad, and indifferent. But it was like the pacing of the show was also interesting. I'm not like 2 episodes, like they got fairly like by the end of this episode, Hulk Hogan is already in WCW. You know what I mean? Like we made, I don't remember when McMahon first bought WWF, but we've gone through a decade and a half, something like that, in 2 episodes. And we're still only at like 94, 95. But I did have a question, because one of the last things in this episode 2 Heat, was Hulk Hogan talking about why he took the stand in the steroid trial. He said that, and again, he's a fucking liar, so I can only take this with a grain of salt, but he said that and Meltzer said it too, that the feds had something on him, so they made him testify against Vince McMahon. He's all, well, I knew what I was going to say when I was going on the stand.
I'll say this. This one is really jumping into episode 3 because he explains it more and you understand it. But I was like, hold on.
It's crazy. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, you gotta. It does. You'll figure it. It works itself out by episode 3. I will say, sometimes good old boys rock with good old boys still.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. clear and present.
Even when it comes back to bite you in the ass.
Yeah. And they live off of an honor system.
That's right.
That is incredibly hypocritical. But at the same time, there's a code to it. I remember I used to work in the office in the field at the local utility company here in Baltimore.
Okay.
And the field guys, a lot of them good old boys, they just had a code. They would talk to each other crazy out in them trucks, but it never made it to their office. You never saw the HR cases. You never now the admin side, where people working in the call center and all that stuff. Oh, HR galore, we taking you. but them people, they would say some shit where I was like, that's a fireable offense. And them men would just suck it up and take it because they knew that if I go to HR or I speak out, yeah, he may get removed or get reprimanded, but I'm gonna have to deal with the rest of them guys out in that truck.
Hey, Tony has said, either take it or you go home. It's kind of how it goes. That's good. I'm glad I didn't watch episode 3, so we got like kind of a natural cliffhanger. If y'all want to know what Hulk Hogan meant by I needed to testify or they would take me down or whatever they were saying about him, you got to watch the next No Cap recap from the Black Rasslin podcast. Shouts to everybody for tapping in. Shouts to y'all for rocking with us. We really keeping this 30-minute time limit going. I like that. Episode 3 coming soon. Episode 4, 5, 6, all that good stuff. Subscribe, youtube.com/Black Rasslin, patreon.com/Black Rasslin. Go follow us on the socials. You know the vibe. We out. We'll catch y'all next time.